The book Growing Up Aboriginal in Australia, edited by Anita Heiss, really highlights the many diverse backgrounds of Aboriginal people in Australia today and goes into details about what they have experienced and their families have experienced growing up in Australia, what their life has been like, what they have had to endure and go through in their education, social life, family life and careers. When reading the stories in the book from the many diverse Indigenous people, I was completely saddened and upset by what they themselves and all their families previously had experienced and still experience today. I've always had an understanding and know how horrific the past has been in this country for Indigenous people, but it was shocking to me the amount of racism, hurdles, injustices and struggles that still occur. We are still so far from a level playing field, and to help this, I believe a huge start is in education about Indigenous culture, life and history, and starting educating at a young age. I personally believe there is not enough inclusive education, and from reading some of the stories in this book, there isn't enough taught in school today. I believe Indigenous studies should be a compulsory part of the education curriculum from early education, not just as a suggestion of what to include, but as a compulsory as literacy, numeracy or science is. It should be part of the curriculum so that people have an understanding, and is not just an understanding of Indigenous culture, but to make it part of normal everyday life. Maybe this means implicating a similar system to the New Zealand education system for their Indigenous people, as many Indigenous children are bilingual. Maybe there should be a dual language approach, learning in a language you understand, as suggested by Samantha Disbray of Charles Darwin University. I definitely don't have all the answers, but I know we definitely need a different way of assessing literacy and numeracy in this country to make it fair for learners of multiple languages, like many Indigenous children are. Maybe we need more Indigenous teachers working with other teachers in collaboration in schools to help support an Indigenous curriculum and Indigenous learning. Samantha Disbray notes that there are fewer qualified Aboriginal teachers in remote Australia today than in the 80s, and that it is essential for a teamwork approach to bridge the education gap. Indigenous teachers working beside non-Indigenous in bilingual teams. In my work at Montessori in McLaren Vale, my director has occasionally gone to teach and help start and mentor Montessori programs on the Torres Strait Islands. Working in collaboration with the local community, they ask for help and she flies over at her own expense for a term to work with early childhood kindies and schools there. There needs to be more collaborations like this. Many Australians in everyday situations just don't have an understanding of how much disadvantage it is being an Indigenous person. As Leonard Freeman and B. Staley reported, the inequity in the curriculum where Aboriginal language speaking students are required to catch up to their monolingual English speaking peers by Year 3 for NAPLAN standards. Then when they can't, they're labelled as failures. A lot of teaching of Aboriginal history in school tends to be in upper primary to senior school and is often mostly about white people discovering Australia, when in actual fact Aboriginal people were already here. This is an example given in one of the stories in the book, Growing Up Aboriginal in Australia, and the girl always makes a point of shifting her assignments to have an Aboriginal focus because she felt there wasn't much focus on the Aboriginal people in Australian history books in schools. This is an ongoing theme in the stories of this book, the ability to fit in. Robin Moore at the University of Tasmania agrees that secondary school history books still imply Australians are white, and textbook depictions are not only relevant to experiences of national belonging or exclusion. Research has shown students that aren't represented in textbooks perform worse academically. Many of the writers say in this book that they are too white to be black or too black to be white. There is still so much racism in today's society and people don't feel included. I think a lot of this can be helped through education and starting young in early childhood education, starting when children are 2 or 3 and making Aboriginal culture and education part of everyday life for all Australians. We all can benefit from this. Hopefully it makes a more inclusive Australia. Amy Graham, Georgia Nutton and Vincent Yaofeng He state that for the gap to truly be narrowed, we must address the root cause of existing inequality and the factors that undermine educational attainment, engagement and success for Indigenous children. Saying sorry is a start, but more still needs to be done, and not enough is being done.